What's up, Studs Canal here? Bulls on Wall Street. Holy shamoly. Dude, a nasty McGee today, man. You know, this was, it felt like a bloodbath. Even though the market was just down, 1%, the names that we've all been trading were down considerably. Didn't get many setups to the upside. This was a trend down day. You can see right off the bat on the QQQs, you gapped down, you popped up, and then it was just every spike got faded off. And you did have a stick save into the close. I wouldn't read too much into that. But, overall, just a nasty day. One of the things that was happening too is, you can see, man, it was like the biggest losers were the worst 20 performers over the past week were the 50 largest gainers, right, in the small cap index. So this is like your ABAT, CRML, uamy. This is where all the action, like the bloodbath, comes in from, the stuff that we've wanted to be trading, right? That's your nuclears, your rare earths, and your quantum. So, what comes up must come down, and holy moly, like, dude, when you are seeing this in real time to the upside, you never think that this can come down. But, we've seen this story so many times before. I was a couple days early trying to short some of these things, especially the quantums. But, now we're getting this kind of deflation. And things have dropped in half, and I think that's probably where you want to start looking for maybe a potential bounce. I do not believe any of these names are going back to the highs by the end of the year or anytime soon. This type of destruction takes months, if not longer, to heal, right? It's not like it just goes like this. Bottoms are a process, very rarely just an event. There's like fits and starts. Like you could have an epic bounce, but then it'll come back down, make a higher low, and then you'll have this months of just like, and so if you are bag holding, don't do it. Right? You get a little bit of a bounce. You got to just let let some of these things go. Most likely, I don't think you're going back to $60 on RGTI. I don't think you're going back to $50 on QBTS or any of this kind of stuff. So just kind of be mindful of this. It was an awesome run, and now it's time to move on. And there'll be new things to trade. Right? It's earnings season. One thing to just remember for anybody that's new. The best money in trading is made when you're just running up your EMA. So this green shaded area is your 9 to 20 EMA. When you're just running up this is the easy money, right? Once these things, shift down and you break under them, much more difficult trade. So you want to you're looking at something like this iron and you're like, oh my gosh, it's so much cheaper than it was a couple days ago. Well, that could get a lot more cheap than you think, right? So just kind of be mindful of those things. So where do we go from here, right? That's the, the big hairy, butt. So what we want to be doing, I think personally, is we've got ourselves a couple things we can do, right? And there's still all sorts of pockets of strength. The market is 1% off highs. So don't worry so much about, what's happening in the indexes. We're 1% off highs. It was nasty. We saw Palantir and some of these names also get shredded now, but they got bought up at some support here. They've all been stuck in a range for a long time, right? So the mega caps don't even really matter right now because none of them have been tradable. Palantir's been stuck in a range, right? Microsoft has been stuck in a big, giant range since its earnings, right? So on and so forth. So most of them have been just doing nothing anyways. Let's see what we can do for tomorrow, all right? So a couple things. There's some pockets of strength. If you look first at just indexes, right? So let's just go for today. Indexes. You see oil was up. The VIX was up a little bit. Steel was up. India's up, so on and so forth, right? And then you had quite a few nasty, nasty little turds like Solana, XRP, right? So on and so forth. So we have some pockets of strength here. And I think we should probably pay attention. I think we probably should pay attention to it. So what do we want to do? I thought, first of all, there were some interesting relative strength in UUU. This came right down into support. Big reversal. This is a engulfing candle times a few, right? It gapped down, and it was an all-day trender. I think we got to pay attention to that kind of relative strength on a day where things felt so nasty, right? Where they felt so jiggy. I think this is something we want to pay attention to. Okay. Beyond that, I thought UAMY had a pretty nice day. So it's been, after that big pull, it's getting absorbed here, right? Dip, absorb, dip, absorb, dip, absorb. You know, if they can kind of clear this box here, I think that's going to have, dude, that's going to have yourself a little hootenanny. Pegasystems. I thought this was an interesting earnings play today. You know, it was up 14%, 5 million shares of volume, clearing out just tons of range here. I think this is something probably to keep an eye on. Once again, like, we need to find new stocks to trade, right? We need to find new stocks to trade and new sectors to trade at some point. And I'm just keeping track of all these earnings plays to see, like, where the next trender is going to be, right? And I think this could be, I don't know if this is going to be something, but this is something worth watching over here, right? Par, this was an oil. By the way, a lot of random, you know, even the oil itself has been in the shitter for most of the year. Some of these, like DK, Par, like a lot of these look pretty good, you know, so just something to kind of keep on your watch list over there. I thought this StubHub, it's got a rebounding pattern here. We've got a little base breakout, probably around 20 bucks, give or take. You know, now guys, look, is this like some big, sexy, juicy setup? No. This is like when you go to the bar with your buddies from high school, right? And nobody else is around that you know. And everybody's striking out all night. And there's two biggies, right? Two big ones just across the bar. And you guys at first are kind of making fun of them, like, man, look at those oinkers, right? And then as it becomes 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, the beers are flowing. You go from the Miller Lights to maybe like a Blue Moon. Then you go from the Blue Moon to like, let's like, you know, just do a couple shots of tequila. Then you go from the tequila to the whiskey. And then you're like doing, you know, then you're bumming ciggies off people off the street. And then all of a sudden, those two girls across the bar, right? All of a sudden, they start looking pretty good, right? Now, all of a sudden, there's four of you guys. And everybody's kind of like, man, how do I ditch these idiots and go get these girls, right? And that's kind of where we're at with some of these setups. They're not picture perfect, but at 2 in the morning, this will do, right? It's a good look, right? So I would keep that on the watch list. Google, you know, Google, out of all the large caps, I think this one is the one that looks the best. You got a little bit of a box here. Google sucks to trade for the most part. The ATR is a little bit low. You're going to have to do the options on it. I would roll in with maybe, you know, your earnings are next week. So, you know, you're probably going to have to do like Friday expiration, just the next strike price if you see the good setup on it. I think that can work. DELL I'm really into. You know, this is the second day it closed green, you know, and has the second day in a row it also dipped down and got absorbed, all right, and held this 20. And so you've got kind of like a little 4-day range right there, all right? And so if you could kind of clear this, I think that kind of triggers this whole, you know, bounce pattern that it's showing. You know, relative strength, still holding its trend, retesting a key breakout spot. You know, you give me a momentum stock and it's holding in the bone zone. I think that's right up our alley. nbis. Yeah, I took a little bit of this for a day trade when it hit the 50-day moving average. I didn't hold any overnight. You know, I was goofing around with the baby, trading off my laptop, but it had a decent close, you know, and then it kind of dumped a little bit after hours. I'm not sure if we're in an environment where I want to necessarily anticipate the bounce on this. I would rather have like a confirmation candle before I add into the end of the day, but it looks very, very good if this AI starts to catch a bid. Once again, we don't really know. They've been shemangled, but the stochastics are at 8, right? All of this stuff is into the bounce zone. I think ASTS could be another one. This probably is going to be a little bit easier to bounce than, like, say, something like an oklo that you've got a lot of range and everybody's watching it. This one is like, you know, $102. They're saying too, dude, give me a gap down tomorrow where we bounce this thing. CRML, you know, we took this in the morning for like a hot second on the gap down. So it's 622 gap down. We took it at the open and kind of sold into this gap fill. And then I didn't see a setup the rest of the day on it as it just trended down. I'd be willing to try this one again just based on, right, the uamy relative strength and the UUU relative strength. You know, based on that, I think I'm willing to try this. It's retraced more than 50%. You know, it's probably time. This hits the 50 tomorrow. Somewhere between 50 and 20. I'm interested for potential bounce. I got Liu here too at the 50. You know, that's about 30 points away on a gap down. That'd be just epic. Like I said, like you can really kind of throw, you know, RKLB similar to ASTS, right? Like they all kind of look, you know, similar. But I want these momos that have, like, you know, that have pulled back. But I want the big support, right? I don't want like a mini support. I want a big support. You know, like if oklo gaps down and you get into, I'm going to wake up early tomorrow. Because if it gaps down 107, 108, that's a 50% retracement basically. You know, I think at that point we come in hot on it. For the day trade, I would be shocked if this came back ever to 190 in the next, you know, short period of time, weeks to months. It's going to take a long time to heal, you know, this kind of stuff. Careful on this one. The ATR is monstrous. $21 for all the volume it does. It's very rare you see a stock that does 40 million shares in volume with a 20% damn ATR, right? 20 points. Of course, this is a, you know, 10-day ATR, so we're really just kind of counting this right here. But the, you know, give me a gap down on this. I think we try to long it. Guys, careful now. Bounce trades are very, very hard. So there's two aspects of this. You know, when the stocks are going up and you're shorting it, it goes up a lot more than you think, right? And then everybody gets squeezed. The same thing happens when a stock starts crashing down. Wherever you think the bounce spot is, right? Like it can just keep going and going and going. And so you got to be careful. Got to be careful when you see this kind of stuff, all right? So that's the list. I'm sticking to it. Once again, you know, I wouldn't consider this like anything like grade A, prime time, marriage material. But a lot of, hey, 2 a.m.s and a slice of pizza is out here. So I love you guys. Peace.